Privilege, I don't know where to start, but I'm going to start by saying to Sarah, right back at you. I'm meeting a lot of people that spend a lot of time in the State House, and Sarah is on a trajectory in that building. And I am so happy to serve chairwoman, which is what you are titled now,
Chairman.
on the committee. So good things, because I do serve on Sarah's committee on tourism. I also want to recognize Cleon. Cleon confided in me that he actually drives up and back every day. You're going to actually spend some time in the car with me. So in advance, let me apologize. And then for everybody here, there are so many faces that I saw during the campaign that we stood out together, holding signs, working so hard, checks that were written to get us into these positions. And I also certainly want to acknowledge Sheila Lyons, who is here. So many hours we spent looking at each other, supposedly against each other, but agreeing on virtually everything. And to have you as a partner at the county level, and Mary Pat, what an honor. I want to acknowledge the woman who got me here, Stephanie Cox, who ran my campaign. Put up with me, and certainly I want to acknowledge my good friend who was the county commissioner, Lance Lambros, who literally calls me up on a daily basis and just says into his cell phone, "Smile, Dan." So if I'm smiling, it's Lance. It is unfortunate that the congressman is being held hostage in Washington now by the party that is saying, "So be it." I want to talk a little bit this morning about fire in the belly. And I just want to say that my staff keeps saying to me, "Dan, people want to hear about the boots on the ground stuff. What's going on in the Cape Cod Islands? What are you working on? What's the specific legislation?" I'm going to get to a little bit of that. But we as Democrats right now need to be feeling fire in the belly. This is not acceptable, what's going on. What's going on in Washington is not acceptable. What's going on in Wisconsin is absolutely not acceptable. Okay? Right, the statistic is presented so many ways to us. Here's a stark statistic, though. The 400 wealthiest people in this country make more money on an annual basis than the lowest 100 million people in this country. Think about that for a minute. The top 1% is making 23.5% of the income in this country. Okay, that is down from the top 1% making 9% of the income roughly 30 years ago. What is happening in our generation is not sustainable. People talk about sustainability. The economic disparity in this country is going to drag us all down. And there is only one answer to that, and that's a strong labor movement. It's the only answer. And we as Democrats need to become advocates and carry the torch for a labor movement that represents the middle class in this country for future generations. People talk about labor history. It's important to understand labor history. But it's important that we as Democrats lead the target and understand what that means going forward. And we all need to work together on that. It is by process of elimination the only way to fix the trajectory that this country is on right now. So that, of all of the big picture 50,000-foot issues that I'm going to be working on, the filter that I'm going to look at things through up there, every piece of legislation, you can look at it through this filter, does it represent economic justice, and does it represent strengthening a middle class and strengthening a labor movement that is going to start to reverse the trend that we're on, the trend that we're seeing in Washington. Can you believe the new Speaker of the House? When told that jobs were going to be lost because of the budget cuts that they're trying to put through. So be it. The party of so be it. It is not acceptable. It is infuriating. So when I get up every day, people say, "Do you like it up there?" The issue isn't whether I like it up there. Who would not like the privilege of showing up under the Golden Dome every morning and walking through the halls where John Adams lived, the history there, the tradition there, the beauty of the place, the people that you're privileged to walk through those halls with? Who wouldn't like that? I love doing that. It's a passion, but I'm not going to forget. How I'm going to evaluate whether I like that job or not is when I'm done doing it, have we changed the trajectory? This is a generational challenge. It isn't something we're going to do in 2 or 3 years. Since World War II, the private sector, which was organized around 35% into organized labor unions, that number is now at 7%, folks. Public sector labor is at 34%. If you wonder why what's going on in Wisconsin is going on, it's because they already see that they were successful with the private sector. Now they're going after the public sector. So that I think it's no longer acceptable for us to look at this sort of, gee, we're uncomfortable sidling up with the labor unions because we just don't know if that's going to work for us. It's time to do that. And it's time to have an honest dialogue with labor about what that looks like going forward. Because labor has to be looking forward as well, not only back and sideways. So that's the 50,000-foot view. Okay? Now, what did we run on? Why are we here? And how's that going? It's going well, I think, after 5 weeks. As Sarah said, it was the scariest thing I've done in a long time. Actually being called by the Senate president, I didn't think she even knew who I was yet, and said, hey, we're having a leadership meeting. There's an important bill about unemployment insurance. As a business guy, as a successful business guy, we'd love for you to actually speak to this. So I was asked to actually move the bill. I asked the chairman of Ways and Means if he wouldn't mind actually introducing it, which he did. But then the Republicans sort of made the counter, and I got up and got to defend the bill. It is actually a jobs bill, even though organized labor was sort of glaring at me because it leaves money in the private sector. And I understand why labor is not comfortable doing that now, because we don't want to see the money that stays in the private sector simply go to CEO bonuses and compensation. We want to see the money we leave in the private sector going to job creation and all of those important agenda items that we've been talking about in this party. So it was exciting to do that, but it was only the beginning. A couple of things that we're working on really hard up there. We talked about energy a lot in the last year, what this region can do relative to how we use energy, how we conserve energy, what we're doing about it. And during the last year, the conversation we've had is, wouldn't it be really cool, beyond the Cape Wind dialogue, if we saw this region as a region that could define an energy policy which talks about sustainability and then has a plan to get there over the next 10 or 15 years. We in our office have already had meetings with the new Secretary of Environment and Energy, Rick Sullivan. We've met with the Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development. That is a committee which I'm going to be co-chairing. And we've talked about how do we retool the workforce here so that we can look at energy retrofits, conservation, efficiency, small-scale renewable, so that we can kickstart the economy here with one of the most depressed sectors, which is our building and contracting trade, put them to work in the energy field. Look at really smart grid and what it means. Work with our partners at NSTAR once we stop them from poisoning our groundwater, and talk about what they're supposed to be really doing, which has to do with energy. But smartening up the grid, looking at saving anywhere from 20 to 40% in our houses and small businesses, and then having a distributive, smart energy production here on the Cape and Islands that will include offshore. There's going to be some offshore development, whether it's Cape Wind or whether it's further offshore. But we should own that. Working with Sarah, working with tourism and arts and culture, we should advertise this region around the world as a leader, a place to come visit, that has defined its energy future and that is doing the right thing. And that's a very, very ambitious project, but we're going to work on that to sort of become a model for the Commonwealth and get that going. So I'm proud to be on Sarah's committee, Arts and Culture. I'm chairing Labor and Workforce Development. And again, we have a ton of work to do, because a lot of the legislation that's coming through Labor and Workforce Development doesn't really get at the problem that I think we need to get at, which is how do we give labor a stronger voice at the table in defining this. If we're going to rewrite a lot of the contracts that we need to look at, maybe the economics don't look as good, we need to do that in partnership with labor. We don't do that as a cram down, like what they're trying to do out in Wisconsin.